Welcome to tonight's Terror, where you can expect original scary stories. Nothing here is written or narrated by AI. If you enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for visiting, and enjoy the story.
We'd been searching for over a year, tour after tour, listing after listing, watching the prices push higher while our budget stayed put. There were times when it felt like a joke, like the market was just dangling houses in front of us to see how long we'd chase. We started to lower our standards. First, it was fewer bedrooms. Then it was no yard. Eventually, we were scrolling through condo listings with the defeated quiet of people admitting something to themselves. And then, the house appeared. I don't mean it showed up on a map or popped up in a recommended email, though it did those things too. I mean it appeared. One morning, there it was on the site, like it had slipped in through a side door no one was watching. 4 bedrooms, 2 full baths, a yard that wasn't a postage stamp. It was too much, honestly. Bigger than we needed, nicer than we expected, and somehow, impossibly, it was within our price range. We'd seen the listing before, 2 or 3 times, but it had always vanished again before we could take a good look. A ghost listing. There one day, gone the next. So we'd never really considered it. But this time it stayed up long enough for us to call our agent. We didn't hesitate, not after so many months of nothing. I looked up the property history. That only made things stranger. The house had been built 5 or 6 years ago, brand new construction, still with the builder's name attached to the listing. But it had never sold. There were short windows of time where it was listed, then long, blank stretches where it seemed to vanish. Not rented, not occupied, just paused, waiting. It was a gloomy day when we drove to see it in person. Not raining, just dim and still. We parked out front and sat in the car for a moment longer than necessary. The porch light was on. I looked across Jen in the passenger seat, taking it in. That porch light was so bright, shockingly so for late afternoon. It was the first, seemingly innocuous detail that unsettled me. Before I'd closed the car door, I felt it tightening in my chest, like there was less space inside than my heart and lungs needed. Inside, it was clean. That's the word Jen used. Clean. She meant it as a compliment, but it felt wrong to me. Clean like a surgery bay. Clean like one of those North Korean hotels no one had ever checked into. I don't like it, I heard myself say with an edge in my voice that I didn't intend. Jen looked at me and then at our agent. Her face reddened. "He just walked in, Michael. Give it a second." Our real estate agent, a woman in her late 30s, somehow named Gertrude, reached for her phone and said she'd make some calls on the porch while we wandered. "What the hell was that?" Jen asked. "We said we weren't going to tip our hand one way or another." "Sorry. I didn't mean to say it out loud," I responded. Jen raised her eyebrows incredulously. "I'm serious. I genuinely didn't know I was saying it." The hallways were long. They felt too long for the size of the place. They stretched like they were trying to create distance between the rooms. The floors didn't creak, not even a little. You'd expect some give in the wood, some soft groan in the planks, but there was nothing. Like every move I made was wrapped in thick cotton. At one point, Jen wandered down to the kitchen, and I stayed back in a bedroom. I called to her, just to test it. My voice barely carried. She didn't answer. I raised my voice and shouted, loud enough to hurt my throat. Her voice drifted back a moment later, blurred and formless, like the shape of speech without the edges. I stood by a window. Outside I could see the world. Birds hopped across the grass. A neighbor's dog barked near the fence, pacing. A car reversed from a driveway across the street. But the house swallowed all of it. Not a sound came through. It was like watching a silent film of the neighborhood. Shouldn't sound travel more in an empty house? I asked when Jen returned. She smiled and shrugged. You're just creeped out because it's not furnished yet. Maybe, I said, though I didn't believe it. I glanced around the room again. Bare walls and blank floors, each one refusing to take shape in my mind. Normally I could see it all instantly. Our rug, our couch, the little bookshelf by the window. In other houses, I'd decorated entire rooms in my head before the tour was over. That was how you knew a place had potential, how you started to fall for it. But not this one. No matter how hard I tried, the rooms stayed empty. We told Gertrude we needed to think it over and drove home in silence. Over the next 2 days, Jen and I went back and forth, round in circles, neither of us quite convincing the other. She wanted the house badly. I could see it in the way she talked about the kitchen, the yard, and the bedroom with the skylight. I wanted it too, in theory. We needed a home, but whenever I tried to picture us in that house, I couldn't. I couldn't picture anyone living there. Then, late that second afternoon, Gertrude's name lit up on my phone. Just a short text. Are we putting in an offer? I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed out, no, and hit send. It took hours to tell Jen what I'd done. We were sitting across from each other at dinner, 2 plates of pasta growing cold between us. When I finally said it, she froze. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She exhaled through her nose, slow and hard. Her shoulders dropped. The look on her face. It wasn't anger, it was something worse. Defeat. I'm sorry, I said. That was stupid and unfair. I'll get it back. It's probably our only chance. Don't bother, Jen said miserably. These things move fast. I'm sure we're already out of the mix. And besides, you obviously hate it. The exhausted tremble in her voice was too much to bear. Well, I can try, right? I would live there, really. And I even meant it. Now, with the house out of our grasp, I began to appreciate the gravity of missing our chance. I was being unreasonable. The house would feel like hours in weeks, maybe sooner. As I spoke, the phone buzzed in my palm. I looked down to see a message from Gertrude. Wordlessly, I slid the phone across the table to Jen. Her face lit with disbelief. They're offering to lower the price? She asked. I nodded. It's a sign. We have to do it. Relief washed over me suddenly. The guilt ebbed just enough to let me breathe. Jen grinned. Really grinned, and then let out a laugh. Sold, she shouted. Moving day was joyful, chaotic. We ran on coffee in the morning, greasy pizza in the afternoon, and cold beer waiting in the fridge when it was all over. Chairs, bags, bins, and the odd-shaped things that never seemed to fit in boxes. We lugged it all in and up, hour after hour, without stopping. The excitement carried us forward like momentum down a hill. Around sunset, we were halfway up the stairs, faces flushed, breath coming hard, both of us mashed into either side of a king-sized mattress. We were trying to wrangle it around the corner of the stairwell, cursing and laughing, arms burning. All day I'd been pretending not to notice how the house swallowed sound. I'd promised myself I wouldn't be that guy, the one who gets anxious and ruins day one. Every time I felt a strange stillness, I'd glance at Jen to see if she noticed it too. but her face was all light, elated, like a kid at Christmas, so I kept it to myself. Now the mattress was folding in on her, bending awkwardly, trapping her against the wall as we fumbled and pushed. That's when a sharp crack rang out behind us, echoing up the stairwell. I turned, or tried to, craning my neck around the bulk of the mattress, but everything looked normal. No fallen boxes, no tipped-over lamps, just stillness. Then I saw the front door. It had slammed shut. That was fine, really. I wanted it closed. But I hadn't heard any wind. The air outside had been still all day, thick with the heat of late summer. I turned back toward Jen, still wedged awkwardly. "That was odd," I said.
"What?"
came her muffled reply. "The front door just slammed."
"What?"
she said again, her voice more strained than curious. From her position, pressed tight between the mattress and the wall, she hadn't heard a thing. I shifted my weight and heaved the mattress toward me, freeing her. She gasped and straightened with a dramatic stretch. "God, this is brutal." "But seriously, how cool are these stairs?" She looked around with dazed admiration. "Did you ever think we'd live in a place with a landing halfway up?" She was glowing, still completely in love with the place. And I didn't want to be the one to dim that. I took one more look behind me at the closed front door and hefted the mattress. That first night, I was too restless to sleep, partly from Jen's contagious excitement. After hauling in the last boxes, she'd knocked back 4 beers, 3 more than usual, and now was lying beside me, back turned, snoring softly. She only ever snored when she'd had too many. But there was another reason sleep wouldn't come, a nagging certainty that we'd made a mistake. Throughout the day, as we carried our belongings inside, the house kept affirming my unease, not the other way around. The walls muffled every sound, and each empty room greeted me with a sterile chill. It must have been after 2 a.m. when I heard Jen leave the bed. Those beers had to go someplace eventually. Welcome to my world, I thought. At my age, I was up at least once a night to pee. I made an effort to doze off, and I think I must have, because I jolted awake with a twitch of my leg. "Hello," Jen's voice sang out in the darkness. It wasn't quite a whisper. The sound was soft and low, husky with sleep. I cleared my throat and rolled over without opening my eyes. My hand wandered across to pat her back. Jen's place in bed was empty. "Hello," she said again. Now, confused and a little concerned, I opened my eyes. Jen was standing, lit in dim moonlight from the window. She faced the closet, its door open a foot or so. Her posture was erect, and she was gazing upward, as if trying to see something high up in the closet. "What's going on?" I hissed. She didn't turn or acknowledge the sound of my voice. "Jen," I persisted, louder. Suddenly, her shoulders slumped, and her chin dropped to her chest. She turned back to the bed. Her eyes were scarcely open, like she was shading them from the sun. Without looking up, or seemingly noticing me propped up on my elbow in bed, she shuffled closer and climbed in. "Are you awake right now?" I asked. Her soft, boozy snore had already resumed. When I woke the next morning, Jen was already awake and out of bed. I found her in the kitchen, brewing coffee. "You had a busy night," I said, with a coy arch of my eyebrows. "What's that?" she asked. "You were sleepwalking. Or, at least I think you were. I heard you say hello a few times, so I woke up and you were by the closet, just standing there." "I was?" she asked, with genuine surprise in her voice. I'd never seen Jen sleepwalk before. I was trying my best to avoid a spiral into a maelstrom of reasons why she may have done so the first night we spent in this new house. You just said, hello. Not like a question, not like you heard something and were trying to see if someone was there, just, hello, I said. That's so weird, she said with a mystified stare. You drank more than usual. Maybe that did it, I said. Later that afternoon, while we were unpacking boxes in the living room, I caught Jen glancing up at the stairs, lost in thought. Everything okay? I asked casually, trying not to sound overly concerned. She replied absently, as though she'd forgotten I was in the room. Oh, yeah. Just tired, I guess. Last night was strange. You mean the sleepwalking? She nodded, slowly, and continued placing books on the shelves methodically. I saw she was organizing them by color instead of author or genre. The spines formed a wandering rainbow down the bookcase. That looks cool, I said. What does? Jen replied. The books. The color pattern. Jen stepped back from the shelf as if she just noticed it in front of her. She turned to me with a genuinely alarmed expression. Michael, I had no idea I was doing that. You're kidding, I said with a forced chuckle. I'm not kidding. How long have I been putting these up here? At least 20 minutes, I said, gesturing to the empty boxes beside her. You emptied all those. Jen, what are you saying? Her eyes were shining with coming tears. I don't think I can remember the last half hour, at least. I feel like I was asleep or something. I hid my shock and worry as best I could and put my arms around her. It's all right, I said. I think you're completely exhausted by the move. You couldn't really have rested last night either. That night, I lay awake, listening closely, but aside from the smothering silence of the house, nothing happened. Finally, exhaustion overcame me and I drifted off to sleep. I woke again to a light creaking. Jen was climbing out of bed. This time she didn't say a word, just slowly walked out into the hallway, leaving the door half open. My pulse quickened as I waited for her to come back. After a minute, curiosity overcame my hesitation, and I slipped quietly out of bed to follow. I found her at the top of the stairs, perfectly still, gazing down into the darkness below. I followed her gaze and saw nothing on the landing. Jen, I whispered, touching her arm gently. You okay? She blinked once, then again, as if emerging from a deep train of thought, or trance. She finally looked at me, startled and confused. Michael? What's going on? Why are we out here? Come back to bed, I said softly, guiding her by the shoulders. In the morning, I found her in the kitchen again, already awake. She looked up at me, her expression drawn. I remember something from last night, she said, quietly. I sat down across from her. What is it? A voice, she continued hesitantly. It spoke to me. First, I heard this murmuring in the hall, so I got out of bed and followed the sound. But I would never really do that, you know? If I heard something in the hall at night, I would wake you up right away. I'd never go investigate it alone. So why did you go? I asked. I don't know. It's like it wasn't me doing it, or like someone else wanted me to go, so I went. Do you remember what happened once you left our room? I asked dreadfully. Yes, she said. She was staring off across the kitchen as she spoke. When I was at the top of the stairs, I heard the voice again. But then I could understand it. She finally looked at me with a tremor of horror and apology in her voice. She continued, I'm sorry to be telling you this. I already feel like I'll never be able to forget it, and now I'm putting it on you. But I have to tell you, Jen said. What did it say? I pressed. It said, "There are 6 of us here." A chill ran through me. What does that mean, Jen? She shook her head slowly, staring into her coffee. I don't know, but it felt real, and it didn't feel friendly. I wish I could say I was sleepwalking again, but I remember it. I wasn't dreaming. Not really. I reached across the table and took Jen's hand, noticing how cold her fingers were despite the warmth of her coffee cup. "Maybe the house is settling," I offered weakly, already feeling how absurd the words sounded as they left my mouth. You know, new construction has quirks, creaks, groans, pipes popping. Jen's gaze sharpened. She wasn't angry, exactly, but the tension in her expression made her look like she might cry or shout at any moment. "This wasn't pipes popping," she said firmly, "and it wasn't a creak or a groan or whatever else you want to say to make me feel better. It spoke, clearly." She withdrew her hand, rubbing her forehead, frustrated. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's stress or exhaustion. But, Michael, it sounded like someone was standing right behind me, whispering in my ear, and I understood every word." "What about this number, then? Why 6? I asked, genuinely unsettled but trying to regain some kind of control. 6 of what? People? Jen shrugged, her shoulders sagging under the weight of confusion. "I don't know. I don't even know why I said hello the first night. I guess I thought someone was there." "Do you remember seeing anyone?" I asked, already fearing her answer. "No, but I felt like someone was looking down at me from above. In the closet, I think. I felt looked at." "But the house has never been occupied," I said, clinging to the fact like it was some kind of defense. Jen shook her head slowly, her voice was dull. "That's just what it says on paper. Doesn't mean that nothing ever got in." A long silence followed. The kitchen clock ticked faintly, its hands edging slowly forward as if reluctant to mark the time passing in this place. Jen stared into her coffee. I wanted desperately to comfort her, but how could I when my own nerves were fraying at the edges? "We can talk to Gertrude," I finally said. "Ask about the builder. Maybe we'll get some clarity on the property's history. See if anything unusual happened here." Jen raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Like what? This house is brand new. Who would know anything?" I nodded, conceding the point. "But remember how it was listed and taken off repeatedly? Maybe there's more behind that. Let's just ask, okay?" Jen sighed, resigned. "Fine, sure. It's better than nothing." I texted Gertrude. Her response came faster than expected, almost if she'd been waiting for our questions. "I'll ask around, but as far as I know, it's just a slow market. Nothing unusual. We'll get back to you soon." Her reply felt dismissive and flimsy. Jen stared at the screen, then back at me. Her disappointment was palpable. "See? She's probably right," I finally muttered, though neither of us believed it. That evening we barely spoke. Instead, we moved about the house like actors in a play. At bedtime, Jen took a sleeping pill, desperate for a dreamless rest. As for me, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling, straining my ears against the oppressive silence, expecting to hear a whisper. Sometime around midnight, I felt the bed shift as Jen rose. Heart pounding, I turned to watch. She moved slowly but fluidly, opening the bedroom door and walking softly down the hall. I got up quietly and followed. This time, she stopped at the landing, halfway down the stairs, perfectly still, staring blankly ahead. "Jen," I whispered, approaching cautiously. "Jen, wake up." Her head snapped toward me so suddenly that I recoiled. Her eyes glittered strangely in the dimness. Her mouth slightly parted as if she'd just heard something unexpected. She spoke quietly, her voice gentle yet distant. "They don't want us to leave." I swallowed dryly, gathering my courage. Who doesn't? She looked past me, her eyes fixed on the dark corner above my shoulder. "They say, we make 6. My breath caught in my throat. "Jen," I tried again, barely audible. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes met mine, and for a split second I thought she was herself again. But when she spoke, her voice was not her own. It was deep and hollow. "You'll see us." I staggered back at the sound of that voice. It came from Jen, but it wasn't her. I forced myself to rush forward and pull Jen away, back up the stairs. She didn't resist. Once we were in our room, I guided her to bed and helped her lie down. She was asleep instantly, if she hadn't been already. I spent the morning researching home surveillance systems. Even as I read reviews and compared pricing, I could see myself slipping down the path into obsession. I was becoming the husband in the movies who tries to solve the mystery instead of doing the one obvious thing: leave. That notion didn't even merit conversation with Jen, though. We were leveraged to the hilt by the house, the move, our student loans. Renting another moving truck and paying a security deposit on some apartment just to get out of here was impossible. My phone buzzed with a text from Gertrude. I asked around, and an agent friend of mine told me that the house was as good as sold twice. Things fell apart during escrow, but that's all she knew. So, 2 other couples, maybe families, had been here. Never quite landed, though. Did they cut and run when things got weird? Then, another, darker thought occurred to me. What if they never left? "When are you going to get the lawn mowed?" Jen's voice shook me from the trance. I set my phone down without showing her the text. I found the security system I wanted at a big box store 40 minutes away. When I got home, I waited until Jen had left on errands to set it up. It felt wrong not to discuss it with her before buying them, but I was worried she'd be against it, and I wasn't spending another night in this house without some kind of peace of mind. I would tell her about them once they were up and running. By late afternoon, I'd mounted the cameras, covering the bedroom, upstairs hallway, staircase landing, kitchen, and living room. Jen returned home around dusk. She seemed more relaxed, humming softly as she unpacked groceries, sharing casual details from her outing: the crowded aisles, the cashier's cool tattoo, the rising price of our favorite coffee. For a moment, things felt normal. Maybe it had just been stress or exhaustion from the move, exactly as I'd hoped. Dinner was calm and comfortable. We carefully avoided discussing what had happened the night before. But later, as we got ready for bed, I saw Jen pause and stare at the closet door, her face blank. "You good?" I asked. She blinked, seemingly startled. "Sorry, I thought... Never mind. I'm just really tired." We got into bed and lay awake, stubbornly fighting sleep, until exhaustion finally pulled us under. I woke suddenly, disoriented, the bedroom awash in pale blue moonlight. Again, Jen's side of the bed was empty. A knot of dread tightened in my chest. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and opened the camera app. The feed blinked to life in night vision green. There she was, Jen, standing on the staircase landing, bathed in that sickly, verdant glow. She stared down into the dark stairwell like she was waiting for something. All at once, she turned and moved out of frame. I switched to the kitchen feed just in time to catch her gliding toward the back door. Her movements were smooth under the ghostly green. She had her mind set on something. Unlocking the door, she stepped out onto the porch. I hurried downstairs and out after her. The damp grass chilled my feet as I paced across the silent lawn. Jen stood in the yard, staring up at the house. Her chin was tilted up, her shoulders back, like she was stargazing. "Jen," I said carefully, "wake up, please." Without turning, she answered quietly, "They're all here." My pulse quickened. "Who?" "The ones before us," she murmured. "They tried to leave too." An electric hiss crawled over my scalp and my arms came alive with goosebumps. "Come back inside, Jen." She turned slowly toward me, her eyes glinting in the dim light. A fragile smile crossed her lips. When she spoke again, her voice was soft and apologetic. "They said there's room for 2 more." My throat tightened painfully. "Jen, stop. Wake up. Whatever this is, fight it." She wasn't looking at me now, but past me, up toward the house. Her eyes widened slightly, fear washing across her face. I turned, following her gaze upward. In the window of our bedroom, where we had just been sleeping, stood 2 figures. Dark, motionless, featureless, their shapes pressed against the glass like stains. A pulse of cold ran through me. "Jen," I said uselessly. Jen's hand found my arm, her grip tight and shaking. "You see them now, too," she whispered, her voice thin and breaking. "They've been around the house the whole time, wandering around with me. I know it." I stood frozen beside her, the wet blades of grass wrapping my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. The house loomed ahead of us, huge and silent. And I understood, horribly, fully, that Jen hadn't been sleepwalking. She wasn't dreaming. She was awake, and so was I. The figures were still there, looming in our bedroom window. Suddenly, they moved. We watched in horror as they began to rise and slide out of view toward the ceiling. "I'm not going back in, Jen. Neither of us are," I said flatly. She didn't answer, only pulled at the crook of my elbow for me to follow her. We stalked in silence to the front yard. As we stood at the edge of the driveway, the house appeared empty and still. "What are we going to do?" Jen whispered. "We'll just walk. We can walk all night until the sun comes up. Then I'll run in and get the car keys," I replied without taking my eyes off the windows on the second floor. "That's not what I meant, Michael," she said, a sob rising in her voice. "I know." The whole of our adult lives was tied up in this house. Years of saving, sacrificing, hoping. I pulled Jen to my chest and took a deep, shuddering breath, my face buried in her hair. "We can't get out, can we?" she said into the fabric of my nightshirt. As if cued by her words, a buzz hummed out into the night. The porch light lit. "Oh, God," I heard Jen say. The light swelled to full brightness, so sharp it washed the lawn in harsh white. I squinted, lifting a hand to shield my eyes. Beside me, Jen let out a small, broken sound. "It's waiting," she said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out without thinking, thumb already hovering over the screen. The camera app was still open from earlier, the night vision feed frozen on the bedroom. I tapped to refresh the footage. The feed blinked and then steadied. Live now, no delay. 2 figures stood there, exactly where we'd seen them through the glass, motionless, watching the lawn. But this time I could see them, not just shapes and shadows. I saw my own nightshirt, Jen's long brown hair. It was us, standing there, staring down. Beside me, Jen's hand slipped from my arm. Neither of us spoke. The porch light softened, fading down to something warm and golden, almost welcoming. Then, with a slow, metallic click, the front door swung open. Inside waited the dark entryway, and beyond that, everything we owned, our furniture, our books, photo albums, our clothes, our debt. All the pieces of the life we'd worked so long to build. We stepped toward it.